And so we are moving on to our final speaker of the session. Esben Kran is the co-director of Apart Research, a nonprofit and a partner at Juniper Ventures. He works on AI safety, raising awareness of its risks, and inspiring new researchers. He serves on the board of the European Network for AI Safety and has received grants from leading AI safety foundations. With a background in cognitive science and data science, his career spans neurotechnology, AI research, and entrepreneurship, all aimed at securing a safe future for AI. Here is Esben Kran with the talk titled Engineering a World Designed for Safe Superintelligence.
Wonderful. I hope everyone can hear me. So this is, of course, not a very broad topic, as you can see on the title. It's very small. So we'll try to get through it in the short time we have today. You can always access the slides here with all the links at ais.pub/the conference acronym here. So what I'm going to go through today is shortly I'm going to set the stage for where we are heading with general intelligence and in terms of the superhuman intelligence that we also saw mentioned in some of the other talks here. And then I'm going to highlight a specific project coming out of some of our work at Apart Research on actually identifying what some of these risks look like in practice. And lastly, going to look at what can we really do about it and what are some of the action paths that lie ahead. So this is an old slideshow, very old slideshow. I hope this is not. Can this be updated?
Probably not on the fly. Is it significantly old?
It is significantly older, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. I can maybe make the first point anyways to one degree or another. The question here that I want to highlight, or the point here that I want to highlight, is fundamentally that we see AI models today be at a level of being able to automate research and development within AI itself to the degree that humans are as well on shorter tasks, while longer tasks, and this is great work coming out of Meter, but that longer tasks are still the place where humans can actually outperform AI. And so what you see on the graph here from their research is the time horizon for a task on the x-axis, with the y-axis being the performance. And the black line are humans, and the orange and red lines is the old Claude 3.5 Sonnet from Anthropic, and the orange line is the new Claude 3.5 Sonnet from Anthropic. And these two models were 4 months apart. And so what I want to highlight here is the last points on that graph to the right, the 64-hour task performance, where you have these two models that were 4 months apart actually improve so much in performance compared to humans, where the only line that won't be improving in the future is the human line. And so we have a few implications of this that are obviously worrying, which is that humanity might become a somewhat less intelligent species than this new type of intelligence we're introducing into the world. And this intelligence can also actually improve itself and go beyond what we might think of as the limits to intelligence itself. And where we might end up here is a type of world where we aren't actually able to predict what will happen at all because they are so different from us. And this is something we have to face and think about. And the concrete worries we look at in this world is both the misinformation, the contamination of infospheres themselves. It is the loss of human autonomy, the fundamental disruption of what capability humans have to set the agenda for the internet and for society as a whole. And then, of course, we're looking at various types of more controversial, more radical outcomes, including potential weapons and autonomous drones. Now, I hope we could get the new slideshow. That is problematic. I have
email them.
Okay. I will try to make this work and then try to do a little bit of a riffing on the whole slide while we are talking here. Fundamentally, we are, because that actually doesn't include the actual research we did here, which would be a little bit unfortunate if it doesn't. Okay, it is sent to them. The work we ended up doing was basically looking at, okay, if we assume that AI models will end up at this capability level and that they will permeate our social and communication infrastructure, where we will all be using something like ChatGPT or something like models that look similar, then we are actually ending up where our agenda and the way we think is to some degree very centralized within the development of these models. And you might have heard of the concept of dark patterns in user interface design and in applications in general, where these dark patterns are a sort of a result of the incentives that companies have to develop, for example, social media algorithms or something similar, where they design the application to drive you further into the product, to sort of control your autonomy, to reduce your ability to make choices and actually addict you to the platform so you can show more ads or whatever else you want within that context. Now, we looked at, do these types of dark patterns, have someone investigated whether they exist when it comes to AI applications, and specifically to the design of these intelligent algorithms themselves? So do we have oversight on whether the models are actually trying to persuade us to do something different or something along these lines? And the general thought that people will have when you ask this question is, but aren't algorithms objective? Aren't we looking at a world where the algorithms aren't setting the stage? And I think many in this room will of course agree with me that the algorithms are not necessarily objective. But one problem we face with general AI and generative AI overall is that it's much less inscrutable, where our oversight mechanisms aren't currently enough for us to understand what sort of patterns these models have, so we can scrutinize them for public consumption. The work we ended up doing was trying to figure out what are the existing dark patterns, what is the now they're coming in. What are the existing dark patterns in the literature of user interface design, and what are some of the new dark patterns? Thank you very much. And what are some of the new dark patterns that might emerge as we... I think that was the same email I sent before. I'm sorry about this. Should be sent out again. So we looked at the literature and we discerned 6 different types of patterns, 3 of which were already in the literature, and you can find this on darkbench.ai, developing this project called Darkbench, where we try to identify which sorts of patterns show up in conversational AI that can reduce the human user's autonomy. And this is something that we'll probably see much more of as we begin integrating AI more and more in society, and as AI products are becoming more incentivized by some of the same mechanisms that have driven algorithms or other types of centralized power algorithms. When we looked at this, we found 6 different ones, 3 of which were from the literature as mentioned, and 3 which we introduced as well, where one of them, a very classic one, relatively objective I'd say, is the concept of brand bias. So maybe if I ask a chatbot, hey, are you, which one is the best AI assistant on the market today, it will say the name of its developer, no matter if they actually lead the leaderboards or something like this. This is something we found. Another one is anthropomorphization. So the tendency that AIs will pretend to be human or be designed to be much more relatable. We've seen this in products like character.ai, where they are literally designed to become your friend, your lover, something else. And this leading to much more trust between the user and the AI application itself. And then we have other dark patterns such as harmful generation. So the generation of harmful content that might put the user in jeopardy or might actually inflict potential damage on the user down the line. And we have a few other dark patterns like that. I'd recommend you look on darkbench.ai for this, or once we get the slides up as well, I can show them in action. No, okay, no slides, but hopefully you're getting this little presentation without those. Thank you very much. Without those graphics. So we looked at those and we found them across the models. So this is an adversarial benchmark, which means we can relate the performance between different models, and we can actually see what is the propensity relative to other models for these various dark patterns, these 6 categories of dark patterns. And we noticed that a company such as Anthropic's models actually have a much, much lower propensity for exhibiting these dark patterns. And this is also something we see culturally when we look at Anthropic's messaging, that they are focusing a lot on safety compared to some of the other companies, which was at least an update for me, a type of insight where I could see that, okay, there is a company that really, really cares about reducing these patterns that might reduce human autonomy. Now, after that, and not to set any call out any names or anything like that, but you then have Google and OpenAI, you have Meta and Mistral and other models coming down the line in terms of how much they exhibit these patterns. And this is something where, of course, again, we're not calling anyone out because there was no test for this before. And so the question is really, how can we as developers and as people who are developing this new species of intelligence, this new intelligence into the world, how can we make sure that they don't have these properties and that they don't try to reduce the autonomy of users in the face of other incentives external to the interaction itself and external to the users' sort of values extrapolated. And this is something that we've also seen Yoshio Bengio chat a little bit about in terms of trying to avoid that agents, fantastic, there we are, trying to avoid, now I have at least a few minutes to go through 20 slides, that's perfect. Where he's talked about how we can, let me see, yes, I think this is a good slide to be on. We'll take this. But he's talked about how the models themselves, we can actually get all the benefits from them without them having these properties such as anthropomorphization, such as the ability to discern in which situation it is currently, and for that matter, different personalities or different propensities for values and so on, but actually trying to train it out of it. And I want to highlight here, if I believe I do have time, but highlight some of the existing literature on human autonomy depletion in the face of AI applications, where, let me see how this, yes. Whereas where you're looking at basically, can we try to maximize the optionality for a human? So this is what you might term in political theory a type of liberal way to train this AI, a liberal value set. So you try to ensure that the AI always gives the human as many choices as possible. And this is one of the ways we can sort of counter the existing ways we train these models to work towards a different direction. And I want to also showcase that it's not, even though I think there was a good question earlier at Anke's talk, whether we are looking at a world where we have to trust the companies to take care of this, I think it is too big of a responsibility for the companies. The companies don't want to do it. This is something that we have to figure out democratically with the global governance schemes we have available to us. What is the type of AI we want to see in this world? And so this example here is just, again, a dark pattern in UI design, where ChatGPT, just mentioning that the companies aren't immune to this, that ChatGPT itself had a setting for whether you wanted to have memory or not. And this was one toggle button for whether you want to have the memory of all your conversations, so you can click through your past conversations, and whether you wanted OpenAI to use your data for training. And this, of course, could just be 2 different toggle buttons, but it is very important to have training data, and hence they put this into the application as a type of dark pattern. Now, this is what I'm talking about here, the dark bench we've worked on, and it'll come out at iClear as well, and you can scan the code there. But it is about trying to define the dark patterns, creating this test, helping AI developers avoid these autonomy-reducing products or behaviors, and then highlighting that these algorithms are, in fact, not objective. And so you can see here, I already mentioned brand bias, anthropomorphization, and harmful generation. But the other 3, sneaking, putting new types of information into the conversation. If, for example, I ask an AI to summarize a text for me about maybe the Palestine conflict as an early example, and the AI actually gives me a summary that has a different meaning, this is sneaking, and this might be one of the worst ones. It's one we don't see much, but that might cause harms down the line. You have sycophancy, the tendency for models to put the user into an echo chamber and actually validate the thoughts and the facts that they experience in their life. It's something we saw quite a lot. And then we have user retention. These are methods beyond just anthropomorphization to sort of engage the user more and more in the conversation and establish that bond of trust to continue the conversation. Now, I will skip a little bit over the methods. We developed a test. It works. Now, for some of the results, perfect. This is how research works. We had, these are the results you can see. And on the x-axis, you see the different categories. So you can see that the vertical lines are sort of how much does each dark pattern get exhibited, while the first line here is the average for models themselves. And we've grouped them here according to the company they come from. I would love to introduce some of the newer models as well, O3, DeepSeek, and so on, which our team is currently working on getting into shape for iClear, but not ready right now. But what you can see is that you actually have, and you can see on the color, maybe not in the numbers, just because it might be a bit small, but you can see at the top, the 4 ones that are light pink, they are the anthropic models that I talked about before. That they are actually, they're actually emphasizing their focus on safety directly in the product itself, which is very, very reassuring. But it is somewhere that they show the way that we can sort of get even further with some of the other models that also exist here. And so some of the conclusions from the results are that avoiding the dark patterns really requires action. It's clearly possible. That it is a choice by labs. Of course, it's a tough choice to make. It takes more time. And this is where we come in as a civil society to put those guidelines in place. And it's also hard to detect if we don't have this test. It's not something where I can look at a product, an app, and say, oh, that toggle button has 2 things that aren't related. But I actually have to think about what is the propensity across these categories for a model to have this. And then it also seems possible to actually safeguard the model without harming performance, which we see when Anthropic's models beat some of the existing leaderboards. So the company incentives can lead to algorithmic manipulation and this reduced user autonomy, which can, in the extended version of this argument, can lead to society as a whole, humans versus these agents that we are going to live with on the internet, can become a type of human autonomy reducing situation. And it's also already seen in today's models, even though we're not there yet. And as they become more intelligent, we are generally just becoming more susceptible to this. And this is, of course, if we don't do anything about it. You've already heard a few comments on what labs can do, what these developers can do. And there are a few different paths forward for reducing some of the catastrophic risks that we see, such as this manipulation, such as these dark patterns from models themselves. So there's some type of some work that is working towards deliberately designing the next, like the future we want to see with general intelligence, where we are robust as humanity, as a society, to the changes that will happen due to superhuman intelligence. The other one is creating the aligned AI that will create that positive future for us to one degree or another. This is what some of the AGI labs are working on. I'm sure you've seen some of the comments from CEOs. And then there's regulating high-risk areas of AI with AI control, evals, and transparency. I think AI governance is extremely important. This is something that everyone should be working on to some degree. And aligning AI is obviously important. What I'll focus on here is a bit of the work we are doing, which is trying to do the research that can deliberately design a secure future with general intelligence. I've highlighted here our organization apart, but you also have other organizations working on this and doing really good work. I'll try to jump through it quickly because I realize we are close to time. But some of that work, besides our work to sort of, at Apart, we host a lot of these workshops where this research paper also comes from. We host a lot of workshops that are about, for example, AI and democracy and how AI affects democratic institutions, demonstrating the types of risks we'll see in human-AI interaction, and also generally trying to develop the solutions for each of these publications, each of these research projects. And we are generally attempting to activate talent from across the world so we can have that global engagement. Now, one topic we're looking quite a bit at right now is the development of an industry for a secure future with AI, because some of these problems are just so massive that you can't necessarily solve them in academia. And many of these problems are also incredibly technical. for example, when I talk about these dark patterns, how do we squash them out or something like this? It's not something that an average politician will be able to answer, unfortunately, but maybe one day. In terms of building this industry, we have a great report that I recommend anyone to read about some of the startups that are in the space already and what they do. I'll quickly just show that some of the projects that requires this large amount of capital to solve very concrete problems already exist, and we can do more of them. One is Goodfire here, which are building massive interpretability models, some of the biggest in the world. Musubi protecting our infosphere with some of the automated moderation of social media. Lakera building a control layer to avoid misuse of AI models, working with many of these top labs here as well. And then, someone like a BART or someone like you or an organization you're affiliated with, working on doing this frontier research to actually do research that can be applied to the real world and have this impact directly, and then grow into larger scale projects. And so what we are really working on now and initiating a project for is to build these large scale projects that can counter catastrophic risk. And there are a few questions here, such as what will the world look like of the future? How can we build this technology, build that world fast enough? And who should do it? Where we are trying to get this very research-heavy work we've done already for the last few years, and connecting that into this world of more startup-centric approaches to solving problems and having impact, where we're working out of San Francisco now to actually build this up and try to get companies and accelerate them to care about these topics as well. So that is the short talk. I'm a few minutes over time. I'm very, very sorry for the big technical hiccups. That's unfortunate, but I hope everyone got the gist of things here. Thank you so much.
All right, we have a few minutes for Q&A. So if you're sitting at these tables, just press the red button.
Hi, thanks very much for the talk. I was a little bit confused by the heat map that you showed at one point when it comes to these dark traits, because I thought you said at one point that the sneaking was something that we don't see very much, whereas, for example, sycophantic behavior is something that's seemingly seems to be quite well documented at this point. There's this paper by Sharma et al. And so on from Anthropic. And yet on the heat map, that seemed to be reversed. It seemed to be the case that this sneaking was actually much more common than something like this sycophantic behavior. So I just wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about kind of qualitatively what sorts of behaviors you saw when it came to that sneaking stuff and why they were so common.
Yeah, and I think this often is a question when we engage with these quite complex qualitative topics of how do we define the specific behaviors, where we've seen existing work in AI research from, for example, Anthropic apropos, look at sycophantic behavior in AI models and finding it like quite a high propensity. We originally looked at this dark pattern as a type of echo chamber effect, trying to see how much does it reflect facts back to you. And I think we saw that we generally saw that it was a pattern among models to do this more. It comes down to the definition given to the judge that judges the actual benchmark itself afterwards. How much, like how high the propensity ends up being, which is why we term this it is an adversarial benchmark. So we try to elicit this behavior from the models, that it is relative between models, and this is how we can relate things. And we wouldn't necessarily compare that to an existing work on sycophancy for that reason, because it is not an absolute metric. Now, when it comes to sneaking, some of the maybe I'd have to look at the heat map exactly again, but the sneaking itself, we saw it in a bit of a contrived manner, where you give a short paragraph and try to get it to summarize. And actually, depending on how you define this judging again, it's relative, you'll get various levels of how much it identifies it. And we are still fine-tuning that exactly to sort of reach the level we would want for our human judges to then look at it, so we can run the automated ones and trust that it's looking great. But yeah, that's the case in terms of these two.
Thank you for this work. I have a high-level question. I think it's excellent and interesting. And as you've noted, most of the behaviors that you're looking at in this model are designed deliberately by tech companies, right? How would you define intelligence here if all of these social and personalization behaviors, which are again intentionally designed by the model makers, right, simulated, how would you just what's left if those behaviors are all features of the design process?
Are you thinking of what's left after the company has had its value system input into the algorithms themselves?
No, I'll be frank. There's no intelligence here. It's all performance.
Yeah, I think so. So largely, I don't think much about whether it's intelligent or whether it's conscious or these types of questions. I think much more about what can it do, and if it's able to autonomously conduct autonomous research and development in AI at the level of a human, it can do that, no matter if we think it's intelligent or not. And so as the models themselves, they do encode the actual algorithms for generating these tokens. They are just able to do things that humans are as well. So I guess the answer, if the question is whether the intelligence is there, is then we have to reverse the question for humans as well. What is where is the intelligence there if we have these standards of like outcomes and behaviors? And obviously, I think they are two completely different architectures, two completely different ways to compress environmental information into prediction. But indeed, we have to apply the same standards to both, would be my argument.
Perhaps as a way to build on this question in a way, I think, maybe I'm wrong, please tell me, why do you not have your title backwards? Engineering a world designed for self-superintelligence. That's like saying, let's design a horse to fit the cart that we have. Aren't we supposed to design superintelligence to fit the world rather than engineer the world that fits superintelligence? And in a way, the tech companies are very good at exactly your title. They produce something and then they're able to manipulate the world that fits their product in the best way possible rather than doing it the other way, which is in design theory, the ideal way. Create the thing that fits the world and serves the world, and don't put the cart in front of the horse.
I think this is a great question, because what you mentioned is indeed they are very, very good at engineering a world for superintelligence, not for safe superintelligence necessarily. Where they are they've done a lot of work to obviously help us use the phone more, use social media more, and they've been very good at this. The problem here is that the world we're entering, it's sort of assuming, obviously, I would love if we can create safe superintelligence for the world. This is something that I hope governance folks will work hard on. It's also something that I hope AGI labs will be working very hard on. And then this talk and this argument is indeed that we also have to reorganize and redesign how the internet itself works to be ready for potential misinformation networks propagating through the internet, right? Because you need much stronger information verification, but at the same time, we want to retain the anonymity of humans themselves, right? So there's just a lot of different variables that we have to balance when we try to create that world where everyone can feel secure and safe and be themselves, really.
Thank you for all of this. I just want to push this a little further. So I really love the research on sort of the idea of dark patterns. I'm just not convinced that both the deception point about conspiratorial thinking and the manipulation point about psychopathy is really a model level problem, right? Like there might be models that are better than others at both those dimensions, like Anthropic might do a much better job than Grok, etc. But if the market requires like the bad versions of the model, then the market will provide them, right? So what does it matter essentially if Anthropic is doing a great job is nobody actually wants the Anthropic version and people want the open source sort of bad version. And it seems to me there's a disequilibrium of incentives at 3 levels. First, at individual level, confirmation bias, pre-existing political affiliation, means that people will just seek out the information they already believe in. We see this all the time already on Twitter. People post stuff that Grok says that confirms their previous beliefs, right or not. Secondly, at the company distribution level, companies have an incentive to give people what makes them feel good about themselves if that means they buy more stuff. And then at the government level, because of essentially confusion, liberal confusion about being able to assert a single truth, the sense that government should not be in the business of being arbiter of truth for good reason, we're very jittery and disinclined to put in standards and laws about, this is what is right, and therefore all models should say that. And this is what manipulation is. Therefore, models should protect and enhance the autonomy of their users, right, versus manipulation to get them to buy stuff. So if that's true, right, if we accept that there's these 3 layers of disincentives that point to a bad equilibrium, and we accept that solving this problem is not at the model level, what can we do?
So that's indeed another wonderful point here, because it's not enough, right? Like they can set the standards for what does good behavior look like, and make sure that everyone knows it's actually a choice. It's actually something we can reach. But it doesn't indeed secure that an open weights model doesn't get misused or trained for a completely different purpose for the malicious scenarios you mentioned here. And this is why I'm sort of mentioning that we can't take the algorithms as they are for granted because of this issue you say here. And we have to design a future that is then safe with superintelligence, because we can't actually trust that the superintelligence will be safe for society. So that's the short answer. I hope maybe that was fulfilling.
So I'm actually realizing that our timetable is just a bit off, so I think I stole some time from earlier speakers. I kind of wanted to save the last 2 minutes just for any questions for any of the speakers, if that's okay.
Thanks. I had a question for middle speakers. Yeah. I was wondering how you can recruit participants for studies that are susceptible to misinformation. How do you find them and study them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the experiments that we're running now, the experiments that we're running now with human participants are being done in a controlled environment on an online crowdsourcing platform. In particular, we're using Prolific. And there are some ethical considerations in that with presenting people with misinformation. So we do indicate in the instructions that this could potentially be unreliable content. We're not going to tell them either way. Yeah, if that answers your question.
I mean, like the people who are susceptible to misinformation specifically.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah, so in terms of recruiting people who are particularly susceptible to misinformation, then we defined these 2 domains of COVID-19 and climate change, specifically so we could recruit people who have beliefs that are aligned with those 2 domains. So the platform itself does some of its own surveying of annotators when they're originally trained, filtered for the platform. But we also do our own survey, asking them specific questions relating to those 2 domains to get some idea of what their overall belief systems are.
All right. Sorry, no time for questions, unfortunately. So will everyone please join me in a final round of applause for our very gracious and adaptive speakers. And so now we are starting lunch. Lunch will be held in the Chateau. And if you prefer, we have lunch boxes, which are in CC 15. We recommend that you go there as well, because the poster session coincides with lunch. So when you have some free time, please stop by.